morning, everybody. For those of you that are new to a cafe, I'm Jenny Milne, I'm your host for today, and thank you very much for joining us on our theme of tourism and transport. We've got two fantastic ladies who will be speaking shortly in a slightly different format. So those of you that weren't there in the January 50 birthday cafe, thus 51st cafe today, I'll keep track. We will be doing some presentations, but within the presentations, they will be stopping and pausing and asking you guys questions. So it's very much more interactive, and we're going to be spending a lot more time doing a bit of a conversation and then going over to the Q&A. So that's why we've taken a bit more time of your diary out for today. So for those of you that haven't been just before, just make sure that you're on mute at the moment. Your chat box is indeed your friend. We are in a cafe, but we can't all chat at the same time. So please use the chat box. And in that, it's very much introduce yourself. We do ask for a postcode, just so we know roughly where you are. It can just be the beginning of your postcode. And I always love hearing what the weather is like in other parts of the UK. So please use the chat there. And as I say at the bottom there, please use it to share.
Bit of a misnomer since it's called.
Oh, mute Jean there, sorry. Yeah, use the chat box. Just to put some familiar faces, and some of them are here. I see Michael Wilmot from our advisory board has snuck into now as we started off. You've got the pictures here of everybody behind the scenes, and sometimes you will see some of them here, and sometimes they're away doing great, decent stuff. But Alex is always here because he's behind the scenes, so he's one of the directors, and he'll be waving at you, I'm sure, just now. And if I've missed any of my other musketeers and advisory boards that are here, I apologise. So, yeah, I often get asked, what does SRITC do? And probably the answer is too much. And we are a lot of volunteers, as you can see from that screen, and we are a very small team of core people. But we pull on all of you as a community to help with various projects that come in, consultations, etc. So it's really about making sure that we come together to make change for rural and island communities around transport. And I get the chance quite often to pick on people to ask them what they think SRITC means to them, and it's lovely to hear all the different ideas and different reasons that you all come to the cafes. So I really do value that, as do the rest of the team, and I know the rest of the community does. So it's all about the spirit of coffee and cake. So I've got my cup of tea. Who else has got a cup of tea here? Anybody else? I think, oh, Sharon's got one, Emma's got one. Greg's shaking his head saying he doesn't, but I know one of our speakers has a really nice fancy piece. Emily, what have you got with you this morning in the cafe?
I've got what I thought was a good choice in a cinnamon swirl, but actually the crumbs are going everywhere. So perhaps on reflection, it wasn't the best piece to be doing while I'm speaking online.
All right, anybody else got anything that they've got with them this morning that's a fancy piece or a nice piece of cake? Anybody? Or am I going to have to say that I cheated this week? I've got a donut, and it's a Krispy Kreme donut. We're in the middle of exam stuff at schools, so I think we're on the sugar uptake at the moment. So I will be eating that when you hear from our lovely ladies shortly. So coffee and cake, really important. As I say, it's not on our core values, but cake should be there under community. It should be cake. So it's all about being supportive, helping each other, innovation focus. I was on a call recently, and it was about how rural needs to be always innovative. Well, rural is innovative, but it's also very simple in how it does it. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. And I think that's a message that needs to be taken away, that it's simple and effective. So moving on to some other bits of news, and there's some family faces from our SRITC core team of Matt and James that were out gallivanting last time. So yeah, what's been happening? The team are going to put in the chat some links for the forthcoming cafes. We've now got them lined up until June time, so you can slot them into your diary, and they're off different themes. Then we've got the water roundtable. We've been doing this work on ferries, particularly throughout the whole of the UK. And I know that there's a number of organisations that have just been coming into the fold on this and are maybe new to cafes. But we're holding a roundtable before May, and this will be the last one as part of a series that we're doing for a project. So if you've got a desire to speak to us about any elements of water transport, or indeed particularly ferries from around the UK, then please let us know. The team will also put into the chat the manifesto poll that we've got. We are putting together a manifesto for the Scottish elections, and it has some key themes which come from the cafes and come from the projects that we've been involved with. So we just want to make sure that we haven't missed anything and what your thoughts are. So please, you'll see the manifesto poll go into the chat. Please do engage with it. We've also got a few calls for evidence for those of you that read the news bulletin that went out last week. One's about dogs and public transport and the role of dogs. I have to say, with my PhD, dogs have been a very big feature in the work I've done, which is actually in national parks in the Lake District and the Cairngorm National Park, and the growing role of dogs on vacation particularly since the pandemic is really an interesting one. So if you've got any lived experiences, knowledge, thoughts that you want to share on that, or charging points for EVs throughout Scotland and the challenges that there are, or indeed examples of international ferry systems and river taxis, then please do let us know, because that is going to be very helpful to provide those lived experience angles. Nearly there. We are members of Scottish Government cross-party groups, one for rural, one for island, and one for sustainable transport. Because we have elections looming by the end of, well, by the Café in March, Scottish Government will go on to a different mode and shutdown mode, because they aren't going to be able to do the same level of engagement. So there's a lot of cross-party groups taking a place online hybrid in the beginning of March. So if there's anything particular that you want us to bring up at any of these cross-party groups, then do let us know. And finally, you will have seen possibly in the news bulletin that I was talking about work experience. And this is because I've got a delightful son who has been looking at this for the last 18 months. And it's inspired me to share with you my thoughts on this, which is that work experience, for those of you that don't know, is very difficult for young people to get. Whether you're a 16-year-old or you're a 20-year-old doing a college course or a university course. So what I want to be able to do is inspire you to actually think about what your organisation or organisations that you know could do to help offer work experience out there, and particularly in the rural dimension. It is extremely difficult to get something, even for one day. Even working in a shop for one day is extremely difficult. So please take that away. I'm genuinely serious. It's going to affect all of us, because if our young people can't get that access, then later years for some of us, they're going to be running the economy. And if they haven't got the experience, we're a bit gubbed, to put a finer point in it. So to that end, we're offering somebody the opportunity, if you know somebody, for joining us in the team for work experience for the Royal Highland Show, which will be taking place in the middle to end of June. And they can help with our team and much wider remit, because we will be in the Scottish Government tent again for the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if you know somebody that's looking for a bit of work experience, it could be around marketing, it could be around communications, it could be around rural, then please let us know for the Royal Highland Show. But equally, please do think about how you could help. And I know one or two of you that have joined today have already taken up that challenge and are speaking to the powers that be to see what you could do. And I must say thank you to the several people that actually emailed thinking that my son was looking for work experience and that I was using the news bulletin to find information for him. That wasn't actually the case, but I appreciate the offers that came in for him. I really like it. So yeah, please take that one away. So with no further ado, I'm going to try and go on to our next speakers. And the speakers here today are Emily and Emma, Lake District National Park and Loch Lomond. Now I'm going to be sharing the slides for them, so I'll stop this in a minute, but that means I can't eat my donut. That's really important. So the bit I want to put in the caveat before that is I'm sitting here wearing a Cairngorm National Park hat as well, because for those of you that don't know, the PhD that has been going on and on and on for me has been based predominantly in the Cairngorm National Park, but I also have done some work in the Lake District. So national parks of great interest to many people, not just in the UK, but overseas. And there are national parks in other international countries. So while I'm changing my slides out, Emma and Emily, would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Morning, everybody. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity for us to share some insights around tourism and transport. Bit of a hot topic. Yeah, but I think can speak for Emma as well as myself. Just really looking forward to as much as us sharing insights, also learning from yourselves. This is still a relatively new area of work for both of us, and as much as we've delivered some initiatives, you know, it's still a bit of a learning process for us. So yeah, I'm Emily Davey. I work at Loch Lomond the Trossachs National Park. My role has existed for the last year and a half, so still relatively new. and I'm specifically here to work with our partners and stakeholders to transform the transport network here in Loch Lomond the Trossachs, and that's included delivering the Trossachs Explorer shuttle bus as a pilot over the last 2 years. So I'll be looking forward to sharing a little bit more about that later on. Emma, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi everyone, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Emma Moody, I'm from the Lake District National Park Authority, and my job title is very long. It's Lead Strategy Advisor for Recreation and Sustainable Transport. So yes, obviously the sustainable transport picture is extremely important, but I'm not going to talk about all of it, otherwise we'd be here all day, but we'll be focusing in on particular initiatives, particularly the Wasdale shuttle bus. So looking forward to hearing all your views. I'm hoping that, well, I'm sure I'll learn more from the rest of you than you'll learn from me. So yeah, really looking forward to this. So thank you.
Fantastic. Emily, over to you.
Great. Just moving on, Jenny. So a lot of you will know a huge amount about national parks, probably more than I do, but just to give a little bit of context. So there's 15 national parks in the UK, and each one's been designated as a protected landscape because of its sort of special qualities. National parks in England and Wales have slightly different aims to us up in Scotland, but essentially we're all funded by central government and we're administered by its own authority. But a really important one to remember for this this talk and what we're talking about today is that authority doesn't stretch to transport. That sits with each of our local authorities that cover our national park areas. However, transport's become a really sort of central to many of our environmental, social and economic goals that we share. So we've posed a couple of questions to the side there, just looking to understand a little bit more about your experience of travelling to and within our national parks in the UK, and specifically why do you think transport is important to us, and it's one we'll come back to in a minute. Emma, anything else you want to maybe touch on from a kind of UK perspective?
No, I think that's an excellent introduction. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so from a Loch Lomond the Trossachs perspective, just to zoom in on our particular area before Emma gives a little bit of context around the Lake District. So we're located in the central belt of Scotland. We're actually the 4th largest national park in the UK, and 1 and 2 obviously in Scotland, with the other being Cairngorms to the north. Around half of our population in Scotland live within 1 hour's drive of the national park, so that makes it a really sort of popular destination for as many domestic visitors, I suppose, as international ones. And we describe our kind of national park split into 4 areas. So we've got Loch Lomond in the centre there, which is probably what we're best known for. But we've got Cowal over to the west, Bredalbin up to the north, and the Trossachs more to the east, which is where our Trossachs Explorer shuttle bus is located. Probably similar to many national parks, we've got a small population. There's roughly around 15,000 people that actually live within the national park, but we see obviously very high numbers of visitors each year. So that's approximately between 4 to 5 million people per year visit Loch Lomond the Trossachs. And the majority of those visitors travel by car. So, in an area like this, that can obviously bring with it a lot of challenges, which is what we are sort of looking to try and achieve through this new area of work. So if we move over to the Lake District, and Emma can give you a little bit of context there.
Yes, right, yes. So, yes, we're based just south of the border in the north of England there. Likewise, been a national park since 1951, so quite well established, very popular. Around 18 million visitors per annum visit the Lake District. And that isn't spread evenly over the year and by location. So at the busier places and at the busier times, it does get very busy, as you can imagine. And anyone, I'm sure a lot of you on this call will visit the Lake District and will experience that. That doesn't mean to say that aren't times and places where it is quiet. So that is one of our challenges. And we're really keen that everyone, whether they're a local person on a day trip or an international visitor and everything else in between, has a great visitor experience, but also that everyone is able to visit the Lake District, whether they can afford a car or not. So that whole, social value of what we're doing is incredibly important. But we'll touch on that a bit more later. But yes, I mean, you'll probably have heard we've got a number of lakes, as the name implies, and popular spots include Ambleside, Windermere, Keswick. But then further west, it's quieter. But yes, I'll pass on to the next section.
Yeah, so I'll just take maybe a little bit of a pause. If anybody, just returning to that question on, why do you think transport is important to us in the national parks? Does anybody want to shout out some reasons as to why you think that's important before we kind of dive into the main ones?
Or Emily, I can do my usual and pick on people. So
great.
Yeah, Greg's unmuted himself. Greg, do you want to introduce yourself and put your thing forward?
Absolutely. My name is Greg Mackay. I'm the director for Bus Users UK in Scotland, so we represent bus passengers across Scotland. And actually, we looked at that Trossachs Explorer service before, and it was run very well, actually. And if it comes on stream again, we may well look at it again. But no, absolutely. Just because most people come to these locations by car doesn't mean everybody comes by car. And I think, we need... like the road space is so precious in these national parks that we should be discouraging private vehicle transport. And actually, the illegal parking that goes along at really peak times in some of these places is a real problem. So I think having public transport access is crucial, and promoting. Also, a lot of younger people don't have cars, so you're opening up the park to younger people, and also. Not all tourists come to Scotland by car. They fly and things, come into Scotland. So they come by train, they come by coach. So, we have to promote sustainable travel and, having access and good access to the national parks with buses is a great thing. However, I would also suggest that we also look at perhaps the option of having bikes on some of the, on buses to allow people to get to the national park and have a cycle and then go back on the bus, so they don't have to find a way of getting to and from with bikes, because a lot of people want to go and cycle in the national parks. So things like that, I think, would also be an idea.
Fab. Anybody else wish to contribute, Emily, before you carry on?
I was just gonna jump in on what Greg said there. I think it's a really important point. Is we're talking a lot about initiatives within the park, about how we can better connect our communities and make it more accessible to get to different locations. But there's also that wider piece as to how people actually access the national park from an outside perspective. And it's important to be thinking about links on the outside of the kind of national park boundary as well as the inside. So we'll come on to sort of thinking about that in a minute. But that's a really good point.
Anyone else? Just unmute yourself, or you've had it and we're moving on. Nobody else has been brave enough, Emily, yet. We'll move on.
Oh, good. So if we just take one each one. So a key driver for us is the sort of climate perspective. There's been a huge piece of work being done by all UK national parks the last couple of years to look at our emissions, and transport is one of the highest emitters. So for us to be able to be working towards becoming net zero by 2035, I think the target is, then we need to be looking at transport and how people move around. So from a kind of strategic perspective, that's the kind of overarching driver, I suppose. In terms of the next, going back to what Greg was talking about, the sort of addressing those inequalities, a lot of our destinations are just inaccessible for people, and people just cannot access special landscapes that are really right on their doorstep. And I think between Emma and I, we both have great evidence there of stories to be told through our shuttle bus initiatives, where people have lived in communities all their life but have not been able to to get 20 minutes up the road to be able to walk one of the popular routes within our national parks. And that's really quite telling. And obviously the sort of transport poverty that exists, maybe a lot of our communities are not necessarily areas of deprivation, but from a transport poverty perspective, that certainly exists. Emma, just feel free to jump in, but strengthening the rural economy is obviously really important. And I think transport in many of our business groups is certainly, higher up on the agenda than it ever has been. Not only from that sort of bringing, more visitors into the area, but also, how people access areas of employment. It's a big sort of key topic of conversation. Managing those visitor pressures, Em and I have kind of spoken about that a little bit, and we'll come on to speaking a little bit more. But obviously, the sort of congestion that brings, the pressure in our communities, the environment, it's a really important sort of reason as to why we're doing this work. And finally, sort of supporting people's health and well-being. And there's so much, social impacts that both of our shuttle bus initiatives that have brought to people's, well-being. And it's great to see that evidence base really sort of coming through. Emma, anything else you want to speak on the sort of reasons?
No, I mean, I think when you drill down into those reasons, there are a lot of sub-reasons, if you know what I mean. But I think they capture everything, and they're all important, and our challenge is to work to address those as much as we can.
Yeah, so slightly different maybe to Emma in the Lakes, who's been working on transport now for a number of years and been doing some great work with very few staff. We've really only seen transport in Loch Lomond the Trossachs become a kind of key area over the last couple of years. And we've always been sort of looking at active travel and doing projects here and there, but it became really apparent through COVID that we needed to take more of a role in terms of how people move around the national park. So in the most recent National Park Partnership Plan for Loch Lomond the Trossachs, for the first time, that really highlighted transport as being key to reducing, carbon emissions, and critical to this, sort of developing a new approach to how we work with our partners, our stakeholders, to deliver an inclusive low carbon travel network. So I just wanted to highlight the Trossachs Explorer there, which is the image on the right. It's an initiative in its own right, but it's just one example of how what our efforts are to try and improve that sustainable transport network. It's not a one-off project. It's about trying to grow that momentum, as we work away in the background to develop the wider programme of work. So that's a really important point that I just wanted to highlight. Emma, anything more in a context perspective?
Well, very much the same, really. While national parks are separate, a lot of us have the same objectives, the same challenges, and just like you in Loch Lomond and the Trossachs, our strategy is for integrated transport. While we're focusing on buses and a particular bus route at this meeting, people need to have that choice, whether it's cycling, whether it's walking, wheeling, public transport, demand responsive transport, water transport's important for both of us as well. So all of these are important, and it's knitting that together and to give people an experience that they will choose to use and that they can use, and that will benefit everyone. So this, and again, I'm very happy to share more details about our sort of strategic context and our partnership plan, but I won't. We've only got so much time, so I won't go into it in detail now.
I think for both of us, like, these initiatives speak really well to trying to get that balance right between how we deliver for our communities in terms of those lifeline journeys, getting to appointments, and balancing that with transport that also fits the needs of many visitors to the area. And that can be quite a tricky balance to get right. But the work that we're doing is trying to push that up the agenda a little bit more, particularly when we work with our partners that are so focused on sort of community journeys. It's trying to widen that picture, and hopefully that's some of the work that Emma and I are both doing to try and highlight the need to be balancing those needs, which is a difficult one to get right. But I'll stop waffling and let Emma explain a little bit more about initiatives in the Lake District.
Right, yes. So I want to start by saying that there is, in many parts of the Lake District, really good bus network, and I think we need to keep shouting about that where there is. One of the benefits of being such a busy and popular tourist area is that it is commercially viable to run some really good bus services in the sort of core corridor. So the photo there is of an open top bus service running from Windermere up to Grasmere. There it is connecting with the boats at Bowness. In the summer it runs every 15 minutes, 7 days a week. Till quite late at night, so in some places we have excellent bus services that are fully commercially viable, so we don't subsidize them, put them on, neither does the council. But there are gaps. We have to be realistic about that. Early and late journeys to get people to work in the hospitality sector, or so that people can get out early for a long day in the fells. And some of the quieter valleys and away from the key corridors, again, it's more limited. And the sort of spurs linking into, more remote destinations. We have a piece of work where we're looking at valleys holistically, looking at all the different forms of transport and how that can link together, and looking at where those missing links are and how they can be addressed, whether that's by bus or through other means. And the key tenet to this is working closely with communities. So there's a number of different types of initiative happening in the Lake District to help fill those gaps. And different models will work for different places and different communities. We have an excellent initiative going on in Ullswater, which is fully community-led, and I was really pleased to see that Michael Firth, who sort of heads that up, is on this call, so he might be able to have a few comments to make, after this. But they have really pushed forward as a community, and now have a superb Ullswater bus service that fills those gaps, and that is a fantastic thing, and it's going from strength to strength. And our contribution to that is fairly limited, I have to be honest. We're fully supportive of what they're doing, but they're doing such a great job. That's fantastic. Our two councils receive funding for bus services, and they have put funding into particularly those late and early journeys to increase the day, and connections to a valley called Little Langdale, where there's a big issue with congestion around people visiting a sort of tourist hotspot that's going viral on TikTok and whatever, of Cathedral Caves. So that started last year and is running again this year. Buttermere Shuttle is one that we've been heavily involved with, which is linking a busy place in to a local town that's outside the national park, but it's giving local people and visitors that opportunity and a chance to spread that economic benefit to a place along the edge. But the one I'm going to focus more on, because we've only got so much time, is the Wasdale Explorer. So Wasdale is for those who don't know it, a very busy and iconic valley. It's the most populous starting point to climb Scawfell Pike, which is England's highest mountain. And so that has become increasingly popular. It's become a sort of must-do thing for people to do. It's also got this iconic view that was voted, and this is so subjective, but it was voted Britain's favourite view, although I'm sure those of you in Scotland have equally beautiful views. But it's probably, in reality, it's probably Britain's, a best known view rather than a favourite view, I think would be a good way of saying it. It's the view that's on our National Park logo that you've seen at the beginning. So, yes, but until recently, it had no public transport up there at all. Rail service going down the coast, but beyond that, no public transport. So when the COVID lockdown sort of eased, we, like I'm sure a lot of you, experienced this sort of surge of visitors, and the valley became so congested. It's a really narrow road. It just became absolute chaos. So very short notice, we just kind of put on a bus, had sort of COVID recovery money, which isn't how you'd normally do it. It was sort of 3 weeks notice, just, let's put on a free bus. But it showed it could work. And it showed that it's something that, was needed. So we have continued to develop that. And, but we were very aware that because of the sort of sudden putting it on, the community engagement in that hadn't hadn't happened as we'd like it to. And there's also, again, this isn't just a bus for the bus sake, it's about managing the visitor experience, it's about managing the traffic in the whole valley, so it needs to be seen alongside other measures. So we worked with the community, developed a citizens panel with a representation across the sort of demographic of the valley. And they worked over sort of 6 months to look in depth at what the issues were in the valley, not just transport, all the issues, and came up with a set of recommendations. And one of them was that they were fully supportive of the Wasdale shuttle bus, now known as the Wasdale Explorer, but they wanted to have a lead in developing it and running it. When I say running it, I don't mean in a conventional community bus service where they own and volunteer drivers drive it. I mean it more in terms of them managing contracts, bringing in professional people. So we've been working with that group, and it's going well. We're sort of doing we didn't just sort of give them the bus and say, there you are, you're on your own. It was a gradual handover, with us sort of still advising, still being heavily involved, still helping, but they're in the driving seat, metaphorically, if not literally. So the bus connects with trains at Ravenglass. It provides access for people without cars. It reduces congestion and parking issues. And those are all things that the community were right behind. They saw its benefit for their residents. It does, of course, allow residents to get around and workers in the hospitality industry to get there. But it does only run at weekends in the summer at the moment. So there is an aspiration to run more days. And the downside is funding is incredibly challenging. And although it is now end of February, and we would want to be having timetables out there in people's hands now, we are still seeking funding for the 2026 season at present. So we can't confirm how many days it'll run, what timetable it will run, etc. If we move on to the next slide, it is time for Emily to take over.
Yeah, there's so much crossover there between what's been delivered in the lakes, and a lot of those challenges they resonate really strongly with our delivery up here in Loch Lomond the Trossachs. So I suppose that the guys here in the national park have been trying to deliver a bus service in the Trossachs for a number of years. The biggest challenge being that we just could not secure a bus operator to run it for us. We're trying to deliver something in an area which is not currently connected by public transport. Somebody put in the chat there about the Trossachs Trundler, which used to run years ago, and we were looking to try and build on that aspect and deliver something specifically looking to try and connect our key communities in the Trossachs, but also reach those outdoor areas, walks, cafes, hotels. But in terms of where the route's at in comparison to where our operator depots are, that was quite a distance, so therefore that was kind of driving up the cost. Availability of drivers at that time was really difficult, and being able to secure the right vehicles also a challenge. And I suppose it's a general scepticism really about what the uptake would be from passengers. So we were looking to try and deliver a service Monday to Sunday, that's that 7-day period across the peak season. And I suppose we took a service design approach. We tried to focus as much on the user, their experience, their journey, and trying to design this around a mixture of residents, businesses, and visitors. Critically, as we've spoken about, we don't have the experience internally in terms of how you deliver a bus service. So quite critically, to be able to deliver this, we had to secure support from our local authority partner, which is Stirling Council in this area. And we've worked really closely with them over the last couple of years to learn as much as we can and bring on that expertise in terms of the team delivering this, particularly around getting the timetable right, registration of the service, interrogating that data and really sort of holding the operator to account over key areas like punctuality and reliability, which is really critical to get right in an area with no alternatives. So it's been a bit of a steep learning curve for everybody involved as that development phase has gone through into delivery. So just moving on to getting the bus delivered in its first year back in 2024. So after all those discussions with bus operators, we managed to secure one, but a lot of what could be delivered really was dependent on what the operator could really do. So we managed to secure two 36-seater buses, which shuttled back and forth over an 11-mile route, up to 8 times a day, Monday to Saturday, with a slightly reduced service on Sunday. So we did manage to get that timetable running 7 days a week. Quite a key aspect was to fully brand the buses, the bus stops, the timetables, to try and make this sort of stand out and be as attractive as possible for passengers to want to use it. And we also commissioned Strathclyde University to carry out an independent evaluation of the pilot. With our funding partners, they obviously want to demonstrate impact, but also, to give us robust evidence and try and make this as credible as possible. We wanted to ensure we had as much data and for that to be analysed in an independent way and during that first year. So just some of the kind of key highlights we saw during that first year. We saw just over 5,000 passengers travel on the service across 13 weeks. So between July and September. Just over half of those passengers travelled for free through the Scottish National Entitlement Card, which is for over 60s and under 22s in Scotland. We'd support from, I think, over 70 businesses and community groups, mainly to help us promote the service, similar to Emma. It was a case of get your procurement, get your funding, and turn around, a service in a few weeks in terms of the marketing. So we really relied on that on-the-ground support. 97% of services ran as scheduled. We did have a few breakdowns, particularly at the start, alluding to the fact that the vehicles were slightly older, and that's something we'll come on to in a second. We had our National Park volunteers as well, about 27, signed up to provide really kind of critical on-the-ground support, interacting with passengers, noting down feedback, and really sort of being the kind of face-to-face point of contact between drivers, ourselves, and our passengers. So then we learnt a lot through year one, and the challenge was to try and get the bus back on the road during year two, sort of faced with similar challenges over the kind of funding landscape and operator availability, but armed with that sort of strong evidence base from our evaluation report, which I'll share at the end of the presentation too. So the aim of year two was to sort of try and build on that momentum, make improvements where we could based on that feedback, and really sort of strengthen the case for the service becoming a permanent fixture within the network. We want to make this something that's no longer talked about as a pilot, but actually returns year on year. So specifically, we went from having very limited interest from operators to suddenly having 2 in the running, which meant we could procure through more of a competitive process. And we had more support from kind of local community groups and regional funding partners, which was great to sort of really see that buy-in from more of a kind of local perspective. And due to that new operator that we managed to procure, firstly, we were able to use much more modern and lower emission buses, slightly smaller in capacity. So we went from the 63-seaters to the 18-seater, but we feel these buses are more nimble and probably more appropriate for the kind of type of route that both Emma and I are trying to deliver on. Secondly, we were able to extend that route to Drimmen. So if you look at that map on the right there, you can see that between Callander and Aberfoyle, that's where the Trossachs Explorer ran during the first year of the pilot. And then we were able to extend that route down to the south into East Loch Lomond and connect that into Drimmen, which then allowed for people to connect onto other bus services and take them into the key train station in Balloch, which is the kind of gateway from Glasgow. So because our operator was based in the south section of the park, it allowed us to connect in with that community, which was a really big win. We also spent quite a lot of time with our drivers in advance of the service starting. We really recognised their role during year one. and just wanted to make sure that they were supported and knowledgeable about the area, trying to connect them in with businesses and communities as much as possible. And I think I think that, the role of drivers delivering a service like this just can't be underestimated. The amount of feedback we've had of passengers thoroughly enjoying the experience because of the interactions they've had with a bunch of super enthusiastic drivers who love, doing their job in this type of part of the country. So I think that's a really important learning to be had there. In terms of the impact within year 2, just to highlight a couple of things. So we actually saw a 15% increase in passenger numbers from year 1. We think mainly because we were able to extend the routes, opening up to a different kind of community, but we also had something to build on. Passenger numbers can still be better, but it's really positive to be able to demonstrate there's been an increase in patronage, and that obviously goes down really well with our funding partners. At really high levels of satisfaction, people wanting to use it again. And quite critically, we asked the question as to whether the Trossachs Explorer had increased people's confidence in public transport, and 90% of respondents to the survey said that it did. And I think that demonstrates the fact that this was a reliable bus service that turned up when it said it would. We didn't have any breakdowns in year 2, so a really sort of important one to highlight there. We had a lot of high support for improvements that we made from year 1 into year 2, particularly around that improved reliability, the quality of the vehicles, and those kind of better connections. But one of the biggest frustrations for people is that the service is still not integrated very well with other operator timetables, and that's a big challenge in terms of how you link in a bus service like this with train timetables, with cruise timetables. It's one that we still need to be working on a lot more. But I think feedback overall is it's incredible, actually, writing up an evaluation report on a project like this to really sort of see the social value that's coming through. And critically, we've managed to attract more interest from operators, and moving forward, we've got a note of interest out there for operators to support the project this year. And going from 3 years ago, where we had nobody interested, to suddenly having 6 operators registering their interest, I think has demonstrated just how much credibility has been built up over the last 2 years, which is great to see. So just to finish on some challenges, we've highlighted some specific challenges that we've both faced, I think, over the last couple of years in terms of delivering bus services. It would be good to understand whether these resonate with yourselves. Do you see different challenges? How are you overcoming them? And how can we use networks like SRITC to try and support the work that we're doing? And we've got that whole social return for investment piece that I don't think Emma and I both have really managed to incorporate yet. We know the cost of running the bus, and that gets talked about a lot, but what we want to try and do is put a monetary value on, what is that social return looking like, and how does that strengthen our case for doing these services more widely. Location of depots is absolutely critical to working in areas like this. We have a lot of unproductive driving time, which again sort of increase the costs. Driver availability, particularly at weekends, for us can be a challenge. Reliable modern vehicles is really important. What does the picture look like around that? Jenny highlighted capacity for dogs. I don't know if Emma, if you guys have seen this down the Lake District, but last year in the Trossachs Explorer, that was a big hot topic, and it's something that we're going to have to try and think about alongside bike capacity, which is challenging when we're working in timeframes that we are.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we allow dogs because it would be too, well, partly because it's the right thing to, so many people have dogs with them now, and people, our local commercial operator allows dogs. I think technically there's a limit of the number of dogs per person, and they have, if they're large, wet and smelly, they have the right to turn them down, and they're not allowed on the seats. But yes, we do allow dogs, and we do get asked that a lot. So we do put that in our publicity, and so far it hasn't created a problem, but it is something we need to monitor.
Yeah, we're probably similar. I think we've got, the operator allows one dog on the bus, but again, I think people just want more confidence that when they turn up at a bus stop, they're going to be able to jump on the bus with their dog, and you can't really give that, because you know, you could end up with 10 dogs being at the bus stop alongside. It's the same, similar to the bike question. There are opportunities, obviously, to retrofit the bus with bike capacity. But again, how do you manage that system in terms of, you know, how many people are you able to accommodate on the bus at any one time with a bike? So just these areas, that they are a barrier for people to be able to use the bus service, and that's something that we need to be thinking about, I think, you know, moving forward. We've put in that sort of community lifeline journey versus visitor experience. I think with the Trossachs Explore, the feedback that we've had is that, you know, as much as people thought at the start it was maybe a service specifically for visitors, actually what we've seen is that we've got a really nice balance there between the number of local residents in our communities using it, as well as maybe visitors coming into the area. And I think that's something that has been quite surprising in terms of what we've been able to demonstrate. Annual funding, big question. We'll come on to that in a second. How do we market this to visitors, you know, more widely than just our national parks, especially in the challenging timeframes that we're working to, when you get your funding landing around sort of May time, going through that procurement and registration of the bus service. You've only got a couple of weeks to market it before its launch. It's a really difficult one to be able to get right. And that last one, working with commercial operators, it's that balance between, you know, sort of demonstrating a return against, you know, what the sort of impact and the opportunities that it brings. So, yeah, a couple of questions just to pose for a discussion at the end. And then last slide, just again, sort of those kind of strategic challenges and opportunities. I'm just going to highlight a couple, which is quite important. That first one, you know, we need to be moving away from annual funding. I think both Emma and I think actually, Emma, you've been quite successful in sort of tapping into car park revenue to be able to put that back into the investment into the bus service, and that's something that we're looking to do a lot more strategically in Loch Lomond the Trossachs. But you know, that's a conversation that's kind of ongoing, but we need to be able to sort of strengthen that economic model for how we deliver some of these services. I talked about improved integration. I think that's absolutely critical. A lot of our community stakeholders say, you know, they'd love to be able to be using services like this, but they just don't tie up. And I think that's it's one that we need to be working, you know, really closely with different agencies to be able to be getting that right. Long-term ownership of the service. Maybe different to Emma. We've got a conversation going on at the moment about how we deliver this year. We're obviously working with Stirling Council to try and bring in the money to be able to put this back on and make this more of a sort of permanent fixture in the network. But, you know, do you look at sustaining the level of quality, the level of frequency that we've tried to build over the last couple of years, or do you try and change that to fit a budget line and make it more sort of economically makes sense at the moment, but do you try and bring more money into the system to be able to driving up that quality? So it's a cost versus quality debate that's ongoing that we're having internally, and maybe the Emma's having the same as well. So okay, that was quite a lot. That was a bit of a quick snapshot, but hopefully that's given you a good insight into just some of the initiatives that we've been delivering. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion.